Hey, everybody, welcome to Dork Squad, a new podcast here at dorkdaily.com. I am Chris Pierdomenico, and I'm here along with some friends. We just got done seeing The Suicide Squad, the new James Gunn movie from the DC Extended Universe. And, initially we talked about doing a podcast like right after the movie, but there was just so much for me to process. Afterwards, I'm like, I gotta really like kind of sleep on this. So what was your kind of initial reactions? Why don't we talk about the first scene, which really grabbed me. What did you think of the first scene?
Are we talking about the scene in general, growing up on the island?
Yeah, like the first, like right before the credits start.
It did a really good job of just I'm kind of kicking myself for not seeing this coming going in, but just completely subverting your expectations, because I remember wondering, like, this is a really long cast list when I saw who was all in it, and I'm like, how are they going to have time to do? Oh, that's how they're going to have time.
Yeah, they got me. Yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
oh my God, like all the really famous ones, just boom, boom, boom. Like, oh,
Yeah.
Pete Davidson's in this? Oh, no, he's not. Nathan Fillion? Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't realize this till earlier today, but part of part of what that scene reminded me of was, have you guys seen Deadpool 2?
Mhm.
Yes,
yeah,
I have.
it was a lot like that.
that.
Yeah,
It was.
Yeah, like that
Yeah.
one scene in Deadpool 2 where where everyone's just getting killed off in bizarre ways.
Or the opening scene of Scream, where it's like, oh, here's Drew Barrymore, and she's only in that opening scene.
yeah. I thought that was really clever because I didn't even recognize him at first. Dave pointed it out to me. You know, we start with Michael Rooker, and they kind of set him up to be like the protagonist in some way. Like, we're gonna follow him. And I was left thinking that it was going to kind of focus on him, and I didn't really. I tried to avoid looking at like too many trailers for this or the media for it. Like, I knew there were other people in it, but I'm like, oh, Harley's on this team, so this is probably the main team. Maybe they're going to meet up with some of the other folks later that we didn't see yet. But yeah, I think James Gunn could do a masterclass on subverting expectations, because it definitely, I'm like, wow, like even when like Michael Rooker's like the last surviving one, you think, I'm like, okay, well, they're gonna let him live. And it's like, nope, everyone's dead.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
It's like title, which was it was so gutsy.
Yes.
Quite literally.
Yeah,
Lots
quite
of
literally gutsy.
Yes.
This
Absolutely.
movie, it earned its rating in every sense of the way.
Oh, absolutely. I also too went on a media blackout, just seeing very few trailers for this too. So I just wanted to be kind of surprised with what I was going to see. But I do remember reading like at least like one thing saying that James Gunn had full control over any character he wanted to have killed off. So he just, I guess, picked the characters he wanted to keep, the characters that he knew who were just gonna go, and then of course, like right up until the very end, like you still had no idea like who was going to live and who was going to die. I mean, it was just a real tour de force, especially by the end of it. Like you really had no idea, like who was going to like be the last, like the last Suicide Squad member standing.
Yeah, I know that on my end, there was one specific plot point that I was expecting to happen, and I mentioned this to Patrick, and I'm gonna keep it as spoiler free as I can. But like,
you could spoil here. We're already we do spoilers.
I mean, we already gave away at least the first few minutes.
Yeah, we'll give
well, mine's like this is like towards the end of the movie, so we'll get there when we get there. But like,
okay,
like it subverted what I thought was gonna happen later on, so it keeps on coming is the point I'm getting at there.
Definitely.
The part that got me was when they set up Harley Quinn to have a relationship with that political leader. He's like the president of the island. And, they have like this whole love story, and you think like something like, okay, like maybe I was thinking like maybe she's going to join this guy and they're going to face off against the Suicide Squad, something like that. And like, nope, he's going to die, because they set him up kind of to be the main villain. It's like, nope, he's not the main villain. And again,
But
that was.
in doing so, it serves, this is the third movie with Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, and we've seen her grow. This was like the culmination of a 3-movie long character arc where now she's like, you know what, I'm not going to go for that guy. And I'm going to do more than just not date him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like if there was anything that I noticed interestingly enough about Harley, it was like some of the various tattoos on her, especially the one on her back where it actually says, property of no one, and it has a skull with like a jester's cap. So I was thinking that it was kind of like a callback to Birds of Prey, since in that film she officially broke up with the Joker. So I felt that that was kind of like a little bit of a wink to following from that plot line like into this one, which was kind of cool.
It's a standalone, but I like that it acknowledged even briefly the existence of Suicide Squad, the first one, and Birds of Prey. Like this definitely takes place after those movies.
Oh yeah, especially because I know the characters of Rick Flag, Amanda Waller, Captain Boomerang, and of course Harley Quinn herself, like, and all their respective actors, same actors too, all returned for this film, which really surprised me. I actually did a little research, like, before, you know, I called it a night. Just to write down all my thoughts on it. I'm like, wow, that's actually really cool that they actually came back to, do another round for this.
Yeah, and Viola Davis is. I cannot imagine anyone else in the role of of I'm
Amanda Waller.
Thank you. I just had massive brain cramp there. Yeah, but I can't imagine anyone in this role else in that role. And also for the record, I would like to say that this movie is infinitely better than the original Suicide Squad, just by the merit that this movie has 100% less creepy Jared Leto Joker.
Well, hopefully,
that needs to.
Hopefully, Jared Leto's not one of our fans. Otherwise, we're in trouble.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
yeah. I just insulted his performance.
It'd be awesome if he was.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he's a bad actor. It's just I felt that his direction in like the first Squad film wasn't necessarily the best. I didn't care for like the character design and making him look more like a Sid Vicious slash punk style. It just didn't feel right to me. Like to me, that's not the Joker I grew up with. I mean, I've grown up with a lot of different variations, from Cesar Romero to Mark Hamill's from the animated series, all the way up to Heath Ledger's as a Joker, and like that to me is like more the quintessential versus just this weird tattoos, the metal teeth. It just didn't look right, or didn't even feel right to me in certain respects.
Yeah, that was a big point of contention, and I kind of felt for Jared Leto because I believe the director of the first Suicide Squad movie, like there was more to the character, and the studio just got really, really involved, and we weren't able to see that. So yeah, like I didn't love the style, but I think at the same time you didn't really get to see it fully realized. The biggest difference between the first Suicide Squad and this one is that there was no studio control on this one, and we see how
they learned their lesson.
How different the quality is when.
Yes, absolutely.
Just the thing that stood out for me in terms of like just like general quality is that I've not seen the original Suicide Squad since I saw it in theaters, and I remember that just being dark. Like that's the primary thing I remember, dark and muddy. Whereas this one, like the final, like a good chunk of the film takes place in broad daylight, and even the stuff that takes place at night is still well lit.
Yeah, I love the setting. I know they shot a lot of it in Panama, and just the difference of going from a film where you can tell a lot of it's just them in front of a green screen. Those locations were real and organic, and like you could tell, like that's a real city. That's a real look at that beautiful 19th century Spanish architecture behind them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think like going to actual locations can really help a movie. Like as an outside context example, like Mad Max Fury Road, great movie, and they shot that in the desert. So
Yeah.
Well, this one had this style, like it was so everything was thoroughly thought out with this, as far
Yes.
as the acting and the characters and the story and the pacing, and it works really well. I mean, I would say, I mean, yeah, it's a little squeamish, but I would say it's one of the best superhero movies I've seen. Maybe I don't
If
know.
you're familiar with James Gunn, it was not squeamish at all.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, he
Oh,
started with
oh, yeah.
Trauma.
If you're familiar with
Yep.
Slither, this was nothing.
Actually, yeah, I did see Slither myself, and man, I mean, it's funny. I actually saw that after, seeing Guardians of the Galaxy, and I'm like, wow, like it's amazing, like how far he came from, like that to like, doing like a full-on superhero film. And yet, the one thing I truly love about James Gunn, or actually actually no, sorry, three specific things. One, he knows how to have fun, like in his movies, regardless of like what it is, like whatever genre, to make sure that like the cast is having fun, the script is fun, and that you, the audience, are having fun too with him. Second, like the soundtrack he picks for them. The soundtrack was so great for this movie. I really mean that, just from the various songs that just match the mood so well with each scene. Just like he did with Guardians. Like it was just really cool to see like him just like like cherry picking the very best ones to capture like each quintessential moment. And then, of course, the third thing with James Gunn, which I really enjoy as well, and once again, I think really seeing it too, his use of practical effects, like something that he was taught very well in the beginning, and it still carries on, like in the majority of his work. Like in the first Guardians film, like Star-Lord ship, like everything on that panel is real. It's not CGI. Like, the buttons, the dials, the steering wheel, like those are all real. Like that's not like, like that is like you could physically go onto that set and like as a touch all that. And that's what I felt too here. Like it just felt like a real thing, like like every like all the explosions going off, like the buildings collapsing, like especially in the final climax of the film. It's like it just felt so organic, and that's what I love about it.
So yeah, when I heard the soundtrack, I was not surprised, but I was like, oh, obviously it's a James Gunn movie. The soundtrack's going to be awesome. But I did notice it, and
It was very indie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He
that's
does
a
not,
good way to describe it, actually.
he does not forget where he came from, and he does such a good job of blending the practical effects and the CGI, because you have to have CGI.
Yes.
Like you can't. I don't know if you know what I'm going to mention, but the part where King Shark rips apart the guy in two. So
Oh yeah.
King Shark is CGI, of course, but the guy that's practical. That's a practical effect.
Oh wow.
So when you mix mix the two of them together, when everything's CGI, it's very obvious that that's what you're looking at. But when you blend the two, it kind of tricks your eye, because you're like, well, this is real, so this must be real too.
I think that's part of the reason why Jurassic Park was so successful. Like they
The first one.
the first one, yes. The first Jurassic Park, yes.
Don't get him started on Jurassic World.
No,
We'll be here all day. We'll do a podcast after Fallen, whatever the next one is. But
Fallen King. Actually, no, it's not Fallen
Dominion.
Kingdom. Oh yeah, Dominion. You're right.
Yeah.
It's called Who the Hell Cares at this point.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
You were talking a bit about, James Gunn doesn't forget where he comes from. I feel like, you look at this, you look at Guardians, he is, I use this term very specifically, he is the champion of the underdog.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where it's
absolutely.
about a group of ragtag people who normally you would never even think of as being heroes. And I'll tell you, a certain line in this movie that really, it stuck with me. I watched it, so we saw it in the theater, and then I immediately went home and watched it again on HBO Max, because I'm that guy.
Nerd.
And the one line that it's really stuck with me is when Ratcatcher 1 is telling his daughter, she says, "Oh, why rats?" And he says, "Oh, they're the lowliest, most despised creatures of all. But if they have purpose, so do we all." Like, there's some words of wisdom in this goofy, ridiculous movie about, like, you know, no matter how unimportant you think you are, you have purpose, you matter.
That was a great moment, and I like that we didn't like
Yes.
spend a lot of time there. You know what I mean? Like it was just quick enough. Like if they had spent like a while there, I think it would have maybe slowed the movie down in that flashback. But it worked really well, and I really like the relationship between Bloodsport and Ratcatcher 2. Obviously
The
mirrors
sort of father-daughter dynamic.
mirrors his own problems with his own daughter, and the fact that he's like petrified of rats, and for good reason. And then in the end, like he's petting the rat, a little reluctantly.
Yeah.
It's I will say, maybe this is bold to say, but I think I've always liked James Gunn, and I didn't get into him till Guardians. I didn't see much of his previous work, but I'll say after this,
Same here.
he's one of my favorite directors. I'd say he is.
He's up there.
He's high up there on my list too.
And if we're going back slightly to the underdog thing, one thing that I liked here, and he did this in Guardians of the Galaxy as well, but like he basically took like all these like super not well known characters and he made it work. It's like Guardians of the Galaxy, like who had heard of those guys before the movie?
Not me.
I never heard of. Exactly, and the same thing here. Like, I never heard of Ratcatcher. I never heard of the Polka-Dot guy. Like, and even though that was actually the thing that kind of subverted my expectations, I thought he was gonna take down I thought the guy with the interdimensional polka-dot powers was gonna take down the final boss.
Polka-Dot Man.
Yeah, he kind of did.
I felt that.
Yeah.
I did too. I think he might have been my favorite character. I liked all the characters, but I think just like his whole thing with his mother and just seeing like his mother destroying the city was it's so good, so funny. And it's funny, James Gunn had said that like he Googled like who's the worst DC supervillain, and he found Polka-Dot Man, and he wanted to involve Polka-Dot Man in some way. And if you think back, like we all saw the first Suicide Squad 5 years ago. If you would have told us that the next Suicide Squad movie was going to have Polka-Dot Man fighting a giant starfish, and it was going to be amazingly better than the first one, would we have believed it? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think we would have believed it would have gotten a second chance, but I think that ultimately happened because of James Gunn, without DC courting him the way that they did, that none of this would have happened.
Absolutely.
Well, you can't really out Guardians of the Galaxy, but this came really close, and it's like Deadpool meets Guardians of the Galaxy, and for something this ridiculous to work, you need the right director, and you need someone who just commits,
Well, it's, you think back to when the MCU started, you think about like the first Iron Man and the first Thor. Who would have thought a talking raccoon would go along with that? And James Gunn made it work. He made it work. And I think it's the same thing. He made Polka-Dot Man work, as bizarre as that was. But I felt that when he got killed. It was a great moment. But I'm like, oh man, I want to see him in something.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt you. I feel you, man. I know exactly where you're coming from.
So we should be good to wrap it up soon. I didn't really have much else to say other than, James Gunn's got to be like the most in-demand director now. I mean, he's got Marvel, he's got DC. I mean, he's just like got Hollywood in his hands, and he seems like a genuinely good dude, just from what I've seen.
Yeah, he's very down to earth. I'd love to see him return to horror, and just do more flat out horror movies.
Yeah.
Didn't he do like a Superman Goes Evil type horror movie about a year or two ago?
So he produced that. He hasn't had time to direct, just because with Guardians movies and then this movie.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
I'd love to see him direct one, but yes, he did. I believe he wrote. It was Brightburn. I believe he wrote and produced it.
Yes.
He also wrote the Belko Experiment that came out in 2017.
Oh, okay. So there was also something that I kind of noticed too about like his style, is that in a weird, beautiful way, like especially with the Suicide Squad, at times it felt like a grindhouse film with a higher budget and and just stronger writing, which which is actually a good thing in my eyes because like I do enjoy like a good kind of cheesy movie like that from time to time, and this was definitely that, just on a far grander scale. And James Gunn like just knows how to make that kind of entertainment and make it work in ways that you can't
Hmm.
possibly imagine.
I mean, he
Yeah.
started in trauma and now he's going to the big leagues, but he
Right,
still has that piece of trauma to him.
right.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
a great way to put it.
Mhm.
Yeah, like I said, like if you have a silly idea, you might as well commit.
Yeah, that's true. And he just knows how to make just to have fun with his movies too. I mean, that's the amazing part. I mean, I still remember, when Guardians was just coming out, and every major like critic and reviewer was like, saying in the beginning, "Oh, this is going to be like the MCU's first major flop," and I, in my heart, knew that it was going to be it was going to be a good film. It was going to be a really good film. I just didn't realize how good it was going to be, especially like at the box office to the point where it literally outgrossed Transformers that year. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
wow. It was like the #1 highest grossing film that year. And I'm like, thank you.
It's James Gunn. I'm trying to think of how many other extremely successful auteurs there are in terms of like being very Hollywood successful. So obviously Tarantino, I've made the comparison. It was like Tarantino made a comic book film. Are there many others right now that have the mainstream success that like their films are very, very stylistic? Obviously Martin
Mhm.
Scorsese, although I know that's a point of contention with comic book movies
I,
at the moment.
I might say Taika Waititi.
Yeah.
Taika a little bit, yeah. He's sort of a
Yeah,
more kind of a
He,
goofier sense of humor, not quite as dark
he's
and
right.
getting there.
demented.
He's getting there.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Like I said, like I told you guys last night, I have not seen Thor Ragnarok yet, but I've seen 3 of his other movies, and that guy definitely has a style all his own.
Hmm.
Well, that is about all the time that we have. Did you guys have anything that you wanted to plug before we left? Do you have anywhere? Dave and I have things to plug, but if you guys don't, that's
We
okay.
always do. So yeah, if you are a fan of horror, you can check out my website, HalloweenYearRound.com. I also have a YouTube channel where it's all horror Halloween themed stuff all the time. So a lot of other James Gunn stuff over there.
I've seen his YouTube channel; it is good.
That's an endorsement.
There we go. Check out dorkdaily.com, youtube.com/dorkdaily for all your dork needs. Thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next time. So if you like this, comment, like, subscribe, send it to your friends. We want more people here.
If you
All right.
if you don't subscribe, you'll end up like the people on the beach in the opening scene.
That is horrifying.
That's dark.
You always have to make it so creepy. Like, why?
Have
Come
you
on,
met him?
Because
it's
that's his
this-
thing.
It's fitting for this movie to say that.
Okay. All right. See you next time. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Thanks, bye.
Yeah.